Shotgun to shotgun.
Bob is 140, 144. I'm just co-piloting the rest of the way.
Okay, no problem. We'll start right at 145. I'm going to introduce myself and we'll go right into it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's get into it. I am. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. Abibi Fahodie, Ominira Adulawo. My name is Baba Sekou Olayinka, also Seba Sekou Olayinka. I am been given the subject matter today to speak on the role of spirituality in African liberation. Before I begin, I'd like to give all thanks and praise to Olodumare, the creator and controller of the universe, to the Orisha, to my family ancestors and our collective African ancestors. I want to give recognition to my parents, Chief Obalumi Ogunsheye, and my mother, Omowumi Ogundaisi. I find no fault with either one of my parents. I give thanks to them and for them for having me and for rearing me the way that they have. And I ask the Creator to continue to bless them with long life and good health. I also want to give honor to my family, to my wives, to my children, to my siblings, my extended family, my in-laws, my nieces, nephews. And I ask that the Creator and the Orisha and the ancestors cover them and give them too long life and good health. A little bit about myself. I'm the oldest of 7 children born to my mother, 8 children overall. I am 54 years old. Just turned that last month. I give thanks for 54 years on the planet. I am also an Olorisha, an initiated priest of Obatala, and also a Babalao, initiated priest to Ifa. And I guess that is my credential for being given the subject matter that I'm supposed to speak on today. I'm second generation. Both my parents also initiated into the priesthood. So I am very much a legacy, if you will. And I'm also rearing and preparing my children to be my replacement. I have, at this time, a total of 7 children live in my house, 6 girls and one boy. And if the Creator sees fit to gift us with another child or children, then, the more the merrier. I give thanks for that as well. So without further ado, again, my subject matter today is the role of spirituality in African liberation. So I want to go into the lecture. I have a presentation set up, PowerPoint. I want to share my screen. And I can see Dial. Dial, can you see the PowerPoint on your screen?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Many, sir.
If at any point anyone like to say anything, just get my attention or a question to ask or comment you'd like to make. I like my presentations to be interactive. Those who know me know that I'm not one for lecturing for 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and then at the end, asking people to hold their questions. I think that the conversation needs to be organic and it needs to flow in a natural way. So I would like to, if you'd like to say something or make a comment or ask a question, please feel free to do so. So getting right into it, the outline for this session, I want to define some key terms. I want to contextualize African definitions of oppression and liberation with our European American oppressors and their definitions of oppression and liberation, and how these two communities responded differently to similar stimuli. And the reason I want to do these first two bullet points is because the power really lies in definition. You know, when you can define a term, then you can control it. You know, and that this goes back to African spiritual science. If you can name something, the power to name something gives you the power to define it. And if you can define a phenomenon, then you can direct it and control it. The third bullet point is I'm going to give examples of the proper use of spirituality for African liberation. We're going to identify a couple of examples and look at those as proper ways to pursue liberation for African people. Then I want to just share some quotes that I have thought were relevant to this subject matter and conclusion. And then if there are any questions or comments that people want to make at the end, there should be time for discussion. Okay, so first thing is, based on the title, I'm going to define spirituality. Spirituality is about the place of man as a spirit in the cosmos, the powers of matter and all aspects of the properties and relationships between them in their evolution and development. Okay, so this is about man's place in the cosmos as part of the reality that is the creator, and the power and matter of all aspects of the properties and the relationships between human beings, or man and spirit, man and ancestors, man and Orisha, man and Loa, man and Neteru, man and the creator. This is what spirituality is about, relationships, when we're talking about from a spiritual level. Divine we define as, or I'm defining for the purposes of this conversation, as of, from, or relating to the creator, to what people will call God, the creator, the most high, Olodumare, Nkulunkulu, Odumankoma. The creator of the universe goes by many different names and titles in many different languages. It also relates to methods of communication and accessing of specialized information. Remember, we talked about earlier, spirituality is about the relationship between man as a spirit, with all the other spiritual bodies that comprise the mind, if you will, of the creator. So if there's relationships between these particular spiritual realities, whether it's Orisha, whether it's ancestor, or some other kind of spirit, an egg-based spirit, a motia, different kinds of spirits, then divine, or that which is divine, also speaks to the way or the methods of communication and accessing of specialized information. Divine can also refer to the mechanics of divination, and Ifa divination is an example of such communication. So when people say that you're doing a reading, it's really actually incorrect. What divination is really divine communication with spirit, or different aspects of spirit, to determine what's going on for a particular person at a particular place at a particular time. Religion is defined as a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. That is to say, things set apart and forbidden, beliefs and practices which unite into one single moral community and all of those who adhere to them. Okay, so a religion, examples are baptism. Okay, again, practice, communion, practice, Hajj. When Muslims go to Mecca, preaching, witnessing, or religion can also be something like Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or Ifa, or the Akan tradition, okay? But religion is about a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. Religion also is the idea of the regularity, or the practicing of the practices in a regular, systematized way, okay? And we'll perfectly touch on that a little bit down the road. But what I will say right now is, as an analogy, is the difference between spirituality and religion is that spirituality is ongoing and it's all the time. It's like living. Religion is like going to the gym or going to the dojo. Okay, if you're in the martial arts, you go to the dojo to practice karate or judo or jujitsu, and to learn and to develop strength in that particular discipline. But when you leave the dojo, you carry that with you in all the other aspects of life. You try to, or at least I would hope that you are trying to apply the disciplines and the things that you've learned in the dojo in everyday life. So spirituality is everyday life. Religion is when you go to church or you go to mosque or you go to temple, or you're home, you're praying, you're meditating, you're doing some spiritual practice, or you are reinforcing some spiritual belief. That is religion, not to be confused with spirituality, which is ongoing and all the time, because we're always spirit. We're always in relationship to the creator and all of the various creations of the creator. Definition of terms: strategy. Strategy is the ability to think and move in terms of a campaign. It is about positioning and having multiple options. Strategy is a process to improve a position and to make victory pay, or to make victory profitable. Strategy is not a plan, okay? Strategy is not an idea. Strategy is for situations where the outcome is unknowable, or the steps to the outcome are unknowable. So you can plan to make a cake. You cannot plan to fall in love. You have to strategize to find love and to find a mate. You can plan to build a bike, okay? Because the steps and processes for building a bike or building a house are known, and you can go get the necessary items or elements, and you can put that bike together, right? But you cannot plan to win a football game or a basketball game, okay? There's too many factors. You have to strategize for that, okay? And the outcome is unknown. So strategy is very, very important, because very often people mistake strategy for a plan or strategy for tactics. Victory. So when we talk about liberation, liberation is an aspect of victory. But ultimately, beyond liberation is something I'm submitting to tonight. What I'm submitting to you is that victory is ultimately the principal goal of a society or a people, and is the first responsibility of the state. And by state, I mean leadership, the governing structure of a people. Because only in victory is survival possible. Okay, so we want to become liberated, but ultimately we want to establish that liberation and continue it in perpetuity for future generations. This is how we define victory. Okay, to ensure survival, decade by decade, generation by generation, epoch by epoch, there is a measure of skill that must be implemented. Okay, in other words, that doesn't just happen. You don't put together dynasties the way our ancestors did in ancient Kemet by accident. There was a measure of skill involved in that. There was a measure of strategy involved, because they saw themselves maintaining what they had over time, intergenerationally. So for us to survive victoriously, it is a matter of planning, or I should say strategy. Yes, you can plan, but ultimately to execute it, we must be strategic. It is not just about life and death on the battlefield. Victory goes beyond life and death in a one generational or in a personal sense. Victory speaks to, again, the intergenerational ability to pass on the victory of one generation to the next. Okay, so it's not enough for us to become liberated, ultimately to lose it. We must be victorious, and victorious means to sustain liberation over multiple generations. Sovereignty or liberation is, at its highest level, connotes absoluteness of political authority. To be sovereign means to be absolutely in control of one's political reality. Okay, sovereignty deals with the universal rights and authority of a people to politically exist with their own political and ideological self-identity. Okay, so we are not sovereign now because we are not existing with our own political and ideological self-identity. The identity that Africans exist in most places in the world has been either affected or assigned by people outside of themselves. Okay, we are not our own highest political authority. There's always someone that we have to answer to. Even, I would submit, Africans and so-called sovereign nations, okay, there's still someone they have to answer to. And the definition of sovereignty from the Sanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is the modern notion of political authority that is expressed in practical institutions and political thought. Okay, so I just want to give it, I guess you would call it a philosophical definition as well. Okay. So the question I want to present next is, what does it mean to be oppressed? So for that, I just want to open it up and just get one or two people to give me what does it mean to be oppressed? Because again, the title of this lecture is The Role of Spirituality in African Liberation. So if we're trying to achieve liberation, that means we must be living in some state less than liberation. So what does it mean to be oppressed? Open question. Anyone can unmute themselves and answer.
I think sovereignty is
Not sovereignty.
not sovereignty. What
Oppressed.
Oppressed means that you're being held down or restrained by somebody or something superior.
Okay. Good definition. Anyone else?
It means like not having full agency over your own life.
Not having full agency over one's life. Very good. One more. Let's shoot for one more. One more.
Being oppressed is knowing that you have been on a Autochton, been defeated from an outside force.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. And all are correct. When European Americans faced the relatively minor repression of being colonized by the British, and that was, again, we're calling that minor repression or oppression, if you will, they sought freedom through sovereignty and independence. Their response to, we all are familiar with the Boston Tea Party and the other taxes that were being levied on the so-called colonists by the British Empire. Those are, they're fundamental human rights. They're fundamental rights to movement and self-definition, religion. Those were not being restricted here in the so-called New World. Those were relatively minor repressions, but their response by the American settlers, the so-called, or invaders more accurately, they sought freedom through sovereignty and independence. Give me what? Liberty or what? Give me death. Patrick Henry, right? We're talking about, and Paul Revere riding through the night. The British are coming. In other words, they wanted sovereignty and independence. Now let's juxtapose that with foundational Black Americans we are faced with severe inhumanities of being enslaved, not having, all of our mores and folkways lost to us, no religion, no concept of God of our own making. Our language is being stripped from us, family structure being violated, and so on and so forth. Major, severe inhumanities, yet we've sought freedom, if you will, or liberation through a combination of civil rights and integration. And I submit to you today that this is the very difference that we can use. This is why I wanted to start off with a definition of terms. And this is why anybody who knows me knows that when we begin to have these kind of discussions in spaces that we control, and people begin to throw out terms, whatever it is, one of the first things you're going to hear from me is define that. What does that mean? Because we can throw out terms like freedom, liberation, sovereignty, strategy, divination, divine, all that, and literally be talking past one another because we have not defined the terms in a way that we can all agree that term is to be used. And I'm not saying always my definition is right. Usually what I'll do is I ask other people, what's your definition? And if I can agree with that definition, I say, okay, fine, proceed, because I know we're speaking the same language. But when African people speak of freedom, we're not speaking of freedom the way Europeans are. Europeans, let's go back to that last slide, they speak of freedom in terms of sovereignty and independence, control over themselves and their reality. When we speak of sovereignty, and by we I mean foundational Black Americans, so-called African Americans, we're speaking about, or freedom has been defined by us and accepted by us as civil rights and integration, even though we're using the same term, okay? What does it mean to be free or liberated? Anyone? What does it mean to be free?
What does it mean to?
I think that it means that you don't have to go to anybody to check with them first.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Any other definition?
Also to wake up.
Go ahead, Baba Indiana, go ahead.
One, that's a great what she said, but also to control your breathing, what you do, your wealth, making your own food, etc., your defense, protection of your children, protection of yourself, protection of your land,
Yes, sir.
water, clean air, etc.
Very good and very thorough. Anyone else? One more. Let's get one more definition. What does it mean to be free? We want freedom, but if we can't define it, then we won't get it. What's the definition of freedom? One more.
Okay. He has one.
Can I be a slave?
To not be a slave. You know what? What's your name?
Segment and tire.
I can't hear you.
Segment and fire.
Segment.
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 Very good. Segment. You get the prize because that ultimately is what I'm going to say in the next slide. Freedom for European Americans was and is the power to establish a nation state, which we live in today is called the United States of America, and a government to rule themselves. That's what they define as freedom. Okay? And as Sekou said, freedom for foundational Black Americans was and is the freedom to not be a slave. You see the difference between the definitions. One people defines that freedom as a nation state, self-rule, self-government. For us, we've accepted the fact that freedom for us means not being a slave. You can see the differences. Same word, but two different trajectories. Not being a slave is going to take you to one reality. Pursuing government and self-rule is going to take you to another reality. So for Europeans or European Americans, freedom from repression means nothing less than sovereignty and self-governance, okay? Despite the fact that early Americans shared blood ties with the British, integration and civil rights was never an acceptable option for them. Look at us. We don't share any blood ties with these people, yet we're seeking what? Civil rights and integration with them. We can already see that it's not going to work. European Americans are an offshoot of the British. They share blood ties, okay? I think something like 41 out of the 45 American presidents, including Obama, have blood ties that go back to some kind of aspect of British, so-called British royalty. Okay, to this day, they can trace their roots back and actually come into contact with so-called British royalty. They're related by blood. Yet, when the so-called American invaders, colonialists, decided that they had enough from relatively minor infractions, they decided they were going to pursue sovereignty and self-governance. We who have been totally dominated and decimated in terms of our peoplehood, we see, and we have no blood ties with these people at all. We are, as Dr. Chancellor Williams said, implacable historical enemies. Yet our solution has been to what? Seek integration and civil rights as a way of, becoming so-called free. So again, unlike foundational Black Americans, European Americans have never marched, sat in, conducted voter registration drives, or urged people to stand up and be counted in the census, nor did they fall in on themselves through drugs and criminality. Neither did they attempt to implement a 155-year plan of integration with a people that were once their enslavers. Okay, we've been at this for 155 years. We're going back to the days of Lincoln. And the first one that really sought to integrate us into the American body politic was the first major figure. I asked that as a question. Anybody know who was the first major figure that sought to integrate us into the American body politic? The first major, by major I mean nationally known, historically recognized. Who was the major figure that sought to integrate us?
Kennedy?
No.
Frederick Douglass?
Frederick Douglass. And who was the man that opposed him in those days, or shortly thereafter, that said, no, we don't, American I'm talking about. Who was one of the major figures in America?
Washington.
Booker T. Washington.
Came later. Booker T came later.
Henry Highland Garnett.
Henry Highland Garnett. Henry Highland Garnett. A great spirit. Again, we're talking about spiritual leaders. He was a man, his idea was what? To go back to where?
Africa.
Go back to Africa. Okay? We cannot integrate with these people. We should not seek civil rights from people that have dominated us.
want to say something.
Yes, sir.
To integrate, you can't integrate with occupation, meaning we was occupied because you have the Narragansett, the Yamasee, the Kalik, the Olmec, and etc. We are occupied, so we can no way be integrating with an occupation, with an alien.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. But yet, for the last 155 years, that's what we've sought to do. We sought to integrate with an alien, and we wonder why we're still in the street saying no justice, no peace. We wonder why we're in the street still, experiencing police brutality. We wonder why we're in the street still trying to get basic human, rights and recognitions that other people get automatically. And the reason why is because it's like you said, it's an occupation. This was a relationship based on force. So we want to go into some proper examples of the use of spirituality towards African sovereignty or African liberation. My first example is Boukman Dutty, and we won't do an exhaustive presentation here today. One, for time purposes, and two, because I think that as my brother Baba Tashanga always says, don't believe me, go do your own research. Always, whatever I present here, please go and do your own research and do your own study and come to your own conclusions. Boukman Dutty, also known as Boukman Dutty Boukman or Zamba Boukman, was the leader of the rebellion in the initial stages in Haiti, what we call today Haiti or Haiti. He is reputed to have led a voodoo ceremony together with Mambo Cecile Fatima at a place called Bois Caiman on August the 22nd, 1791, which signaled the official or start of the rebellion. That's the date that we look at as day one. He'd come to Saint-Domingue, which we know today as Haiti, by way of Jamaica.
We got money. I just put one in
He
there.
became a maroon in the forest of Mornay Rouge. Okay.
How much money we got?
Okay.
That's all we got left?
Boukman Dutty. Can you
Tashanga.
mute your mic, whoever's talking there? I don't know who it is. Baba Alayas, I think it is. Boukman Dutty, it said have gained his name Boukman in Jamaica because he could read. He was literate. He was sold by his British master to a Frenchman, and his name becomes Boukman Haiti. They say he was very, very physically imposing in stature. He was very, very tall. He's a very big man. Not only just tall, but very, very big. And he had courage to match his size. Again, he was a voodoo priest, as some say, and although there are some others who say he wasn't. But either way, history primarily records him as a voodoo priest, or hungan, if you will, or obia man, as they say in Jamaica, exercising an undisputed influence and command over his followers, who knew him also as Zamba. Again, this is one of the traits that we want to talk about as far as the role of spirituality in African liberation, is this idea of the ability to influence people and to lead people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. Okay, spirituality should serve as a moral impetus to influence people and to lead people to do things that they otherwise would not have the faith or the temerity or the courage to do. That's one of the examples that Boukman Dutty gives us, is one of the hints of the effectiveness of spirituality in the role for African liberation. Again, while Boukman was not the first to lead a slave rebellion in Saint-Domingue or Haiti, he was actually preceded by Padre Jean in 1676 and Francois Macandal in 1757. So you're talking about, what is this now? Boukman Dutty does his thing in 1791. We're talking about 40 some odd years prior, Francois Macandal, and over 100 years prior, Padre Jean had also attempted. So another theme that comes out is that we have always, or should I say it another way, I'll say it via negativa, we have never accepted enslavement. We have never accepted domination. We have never accepted being subjugated by other people. It's always been the theme or the hint or the thrust, if you will, of African resistance to such things. We are a freedom-loving people. We've always resisted up to today. That doesn't mean that there have not been people amongst us who've been recognized by our enemies who were willing to cut deals. But as a general thrust, African people have always, even to this day, there's always been, even when I would even submit to you that the people who are out in the streets today, when these so-called Black Lives Matter protests, fundamentally, what's in their heart really is what? Resistance and rebellion. It has been redefined, and that's why I went through the first part of this lecture the way I did. It's been redefined for us, terms like freedom and oppression, and they're marching down a path that we know is going to be ultimately unsuccessful. But the genesis, what's in their heart, is the same thing that was in the heart of Francois Makandal, and the same thing that was in the heart of Boukman Dutty, and it's the same thing that's in the heart of each and every one of us on this call, and that is the spirit of resistance and ultimately the spirit of sovereignty, okay, and to reestablish African sovereignty in African spaces. Boukman Dutty had been a commander, or what we would call him here probably an overseer. He was a slave driver and later a coachman on the Clement plantation. And he was amongst the first to go up in, which was one of the first plantations to go up in flames once the revolt began. One of the things that being a coachman allowed him to do was travel around the island, meet other people, and to establish or to learn the temperature, if you will, the climate of the African, or the temperament of the Africans on the island, and I guess how ready they were and how capable they were and how desirous they were for revolution. So we want to analyze Boukman's prayer. This prayer is attributed to Boukman and is known historically as Boukman's prayer, and it was recited the night of August 22nd, 1791, in a place called Bois Cayman. Boukman's prayer, and I also want to submit to everyone on this call that I think that this is a prayer that we should require our children to know and to learn word for word. I think it's very, very, not as powerful in a historical sense, but it is powerful even in a modern day sense. Because again, he does a lot of things in here that we've already kind of touched on. He defines who we are vis-a-vis our oppressors. He says the God who created the earth, who created the sun that gives us light, the God who holds up the ocean, who makes the thunder roar, our God who has ears to hear, that stop. Basically saying to us that we have a relationship with this God, if you will, with our creator. And he says right there, our God who has ears to hear. In other words, never for one moment were our people forsaken. Never for one moment were we unable or attached to our God. He goes on to say, you who are hidden in the clouds, who watch us from where you are. In other words, you're observing everything. So in some ways, he's almost acknowledging the fact that we're in this condition, but you can hear us. We're in this condition, but you can see us. Some might ask, well, why does God let us do? Why does the Creator allow this to happen? My submission to you is, he didn't allow this to happen. We allowed it to happen. What he's saying, look, our God who has ears to hear, you who are hidden in the clouds, who watch us from where you are, you see all that the white man has made us to suffer. The white man's God asked him to commit crimes. Stop. He's saying right now that our God is what? Not the same God as our oppressors. So how can we sit in the church and worship the same Jesus that he worships? Our God who has ears to hear. And then he says what? The white man's God asked him to commit crimes. Continuing on, but the God within us wants us to do good. Now he takes God from being in the sky and in the clouds, and the next line, but the God within us wants us to do good. He's establishing, yes, there is a great creator and controller of the universe, but then there's also the divine, or the divinity, the spirit within each and every one of us. And this spirit wants us to do good. Our God, who is so good, so just, he orders us to revenge our wrongs. In other words, the God in the clouds that sees and hears us and everything works through us. He's within us. And that spirit has to come out. In other words, we got to stop waiting for Sky Daddy to come down and create and to improve our condition. The creator of the universe works through us. We have to be our own liberators with the power and the knowledge of our creator. This is spirituality. Spirituality is having one hand in the clouds and another hand on the earth and taking spiritual things and allowing them to manifest, taking earthly things and making them spiritual. It is that power. It's not purely in the sky. We've been taught through Christianity that we're supposed to worship Sky Daddy, and Sky Daddy is going to make it all right. No, Sky Daddy is in you, and you have a relation, a direct link to Sky Daddy. You have a direct link to God, Olodumare, if you will. And Olodumare, or Odumankoma, or Nkununkulu works through us. And Nyame works through us to bring about the condition that we live under. It is he who will direct our arms and bring us the victory. But he will bring us the victory through our actions, okay? It is he who will assist us. We all should throw away the image of the white man's God who is so pitiless. Listen to the voice for liberty that sings within all our hearts. This is a magnificent prayer. This is it establishes us and them, which is another big subject we have to realize. Who are we and who are they? Who is us and who is them? It says our God and their God is not the same God. Their God asked them to commit crimes. Their God is pitiless. Our God is good. Our God created the sunlight and makes the ocean roar. Our God is also in us, and he wants us to do good. And then he defines good as what? Revenging the wrongs. We've got to stop looking at TV and allow people to tell us what's right and what's wrong, or that we're only supposed to protest peacefully. No, we're supposed to revenge our wrongs by whatever means is necessary. If it can be done peacefully, then fine. Let's look at the Europeans. Back to the example I gave earlier. They were suffering some taxation issues and some other things, but they never were denied their human rights. And how did they respond? Did they do a sit-in? Did they do a march? Did they try to register for the census? No, they responded by seeking sovereignty. We have to define our reality, and our spirituality has to, and our spiritual leaders should be directing us to always, as Bukman says in his prayer, to revenge the wrongs by whatever means that we have to do that by. Why? Because our God will assist us. He will give strength and direct our arms and bring us victory. We have to believe that. The more we believe that, the more we are spiritual. Spirituality is not out there. Spirituality is in here. It's the actualizing of the mighty power of Olodumare through each and every one of us. That is spirituality. Reverend Nat Turner. It is said that Reverend Nat Turner was born with a veil over his face and marks on his chest. We know in our tradition that a veil over the face means that a person has the ability to be what we call a seer. Person has prophetic abilities. And his grandmother, by the name of Bridget, said that when Nat was born, she called him an old soul and gave him the nickname of the prophet when he was young. Again, she's spiritualizing him. She's putting a vibration on him. She's saying that you're an old soul and you're the prophet. She validated this idea that he's born with a veil and what that meant. She's giving him meaning, which is, again, another purpose of spirituality, is to give meaning to worldly things. To give meaning to worldly things. This veil over your face, that means something. You have to carry yourself a certain way. These marks on your chest, tribal markers, they mean something. You have to carry yourself a certain way. This is spirituality. Spirituality for liberation. Nat Turner had numerous visions throughout his life. And these visions, I'm sure, strengthened this idea that he was born with a veil, and it strengthened this idea that he was prophetic, okay? One of them was, he says, the Spirit appeared to me and said, I had wishes directed to things of this world and not the kingdom of heaven. In other words, he was being chastised by Spirit and told that you need to change your viewpoint. The things of this world are not what I want you focused on. I want you to focus on things of the kingdom of heaven. And he didn't take that to mean what these Reverend Chicken Wings mean, which is we'll get ours in the by and by. He's saying, no, the things of this world are not right. They're incorrect. And I want you to bring about the kingdom of heaven here on earth. That's the work I want you to do. Not wait for yours in the by and by, but to what? Take that which is above and bring it here into the physical world. taking that which is metaphysical and making it part of the physical reality. That's how Reverend Nat Turner interpreted that particular vision. Second vision was, he said he saw in the clouds that showed white spirits and black spirits engaged in battles. So he sees this clash that Haki Madhubuti called in his famous book Enemies, the clash of the races in battle. And he took from this the fact that what? The slavers must be slaved with their own tools. That's how he interpreted it. The third vision was he saw blood on corn and hieroglyphs on the leaves. Blood on the corn and hieroglyphs on the leaves. All of Nat Turner's visions were said to be of conflict, struggle, and liberation. He spent a lot of time by himself, fasting, studying, and wrapping himself in mystery. Okay? Isolation. Isolation is a gift. He was able to spend time fasting, studying, and wrapping himself in mystery. In other words, he was able to spend time decoding the visions that he had so that he was clear. But he was, again, like Bookman Duddy, what? He knew that what? The creator could hear him and he could hear the creator. The creator could see him and he could see the creator in these visions, okay? There's this idea of the metaphysical and the physical being in alignment with one another, a direct line, okay? Spiritual is not otherworldly. Spirituality is worldly and otherworldly. It's a connection between the two. They said Nat didn't steal, he didn't drink or gamble, and was known in his community as an honest and wise person. Here's a third tenet of spirituality for liberation, is that spirituality for liberation can only be affected by leadership that is in right relationship with the creator. In other words, we have to be exemplary. Not perfect, but exemplary. One of the ways that we show that, and what that Reverend Nat Turner showed that, is he didn't steal, he didn't drink, he didn't gamble, and he was known as honest and wise. What this allows you to do is to establish trust. Trust. Trust is the mortar between the bricks. Trust is what allows individuals that are separate, like bricks, to be joined together as one. Trust is indispensable in terms of leadership and getting anything done. So this, I submit, is that Reverend Nat Turner established this high level of trust amongst his community as an honest and wise person via his personal habits. We have a list here of other African spiritual leaders, and I want to open it up as well for people to add, but we have Nzinga of Angola, who used the power of spirit to unite her people and to resist the Portuguese. Okomfo Noche, and I should have him down as part of the Akan of Ghana, who did magnificent things. And one of the powers of Okomfo Noche is he did things that we would consider today to be magical or to be basically almost mystical. You know, Okomfo Noche made people impervious to bullets, for example. Okay, he would incant over an egg and throw it against a rock, and the egg wouldn't break. So again, he gives people the ability to realize that that we can overcome. We can, through the power of our spirituality, actualizing through us, we can overcome the weapons, the so-called superior weapons of our enemies. We had Ganga Zumba, who was famously personified in the movie Quilombo. He comes to us from Brazil. Gaspar Yanga, who established a Maroon community in Mexico that still bears his name today. Queen Annie of Jamaica, who led one of the two major Jamaican Maroon communities. Bambata, a very little known brother from Zulu Natal region of South Africa, who was a strong political leader in the early 1901 in South Africa. He led one of the first major uprisings after the British and Boers come to power. Of course, we have the great Mau Mau leader, Dedan Kamafi, and the whole Mau Mau movement, which was based on traditional African culture, and traditional, what we call African religion, African spirituality, that empowered Mau Mau with similar powers against bullets, the ability to disappear and to transport oneself over great distances without being seen, you know. And I want you to name some others. Anybody have any other names of spiritual leaders, the people that they would consider to be spiritual leaders in the African tradition from anywhere, whether it's Africa, North America, South America, Asia, Central America, the Caribbean, any other leaders that you would like to share so we can add to this list?
Big John Horse.
Big John Horse?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about him. Tell us about him.
He was a Seminole chief leader, did major wars here in Florida, all the way to Mexico. Big John Horse.
Thank you, Baba. Anyone else, please, let's share.
Mbuya Nihanda.
Mbuya Nihanda.
Zimbabwe in the first and second Chimurenga.
How can we forget the Chimurenga? Chimurenga of Zimbabwe. Anybody else?
Kijitikili, I think that's how you pronounce the name, but he's the of the Maji Maji rebellion in Tanganyika.
In Tanganyika, okay, so-called Tanzania.
Yeah, he made the people turn the bullets into water. They call it the water rebellion.
How do you spell his name, you know?
Yeah, I'll put it in chat.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other leaders?
Greetings, Baba. Sundiata.
Sundiata. Okay.
Yes. That's my name.
Somebody said, yeah, I love it. He said, yes, I'm that guy. I love it.
And Empress Khalifa.
Empress Khalifa.
California.
Okay. All righty. I appreciate those additions. And again, anybody else you can put in the chat, anyone else that comes to mind before between now and the time we end, please feel free to share it in the chat. So some quotes I'd like to share that speak to the importance of spirituality in any liberation effort. First one is from Dr. John Henry Clarke, Ibaye Torun, in his book, Notes for an African World Revolution. He says, religion is nothing more than a deification of a people's history. In other words, religion is nothing more than spiritualizing that which was earthly, giving meaning and definition to that which actually happened. And you deify it, you make it sacred, okay? You deify it. And that's why I say spirit or deification or whatever you have, your spirituality and the worldly are on the same continuum. We've been taught the spirituality is out there. Spirituality is not out there. Spirituality, if it's true spirituality, it should be able to be brought into existence. It should be able to be brought into the temporal or physical world. And the same thing here. Dr. Clarke is going the other way. He's saying that which happens here physically in the temporal or the physical world is deified through religion. We make it sacred and we make it religious, if you will, when we take it from the temporal to the spiritual. Free from is not freedom. And that was taught to me by Baba Ronald Facundo Harris, Ibaye Torun. I was in a lecture of his at a conference one time, and he says, you know, we gotta stop thinking that free from is freedom. Free from being a slave is not freedom. Free from being, treated like chattel is not liberation. The next quote: myth is much more important and true than history. History is just journalism, and you know how reliable that is. That's by the famous scholar Joseph Campbell. And the reason why I put that in there is because many of our spiritual stories, many of our spiritual tales are told in terms of myths and legends. And people say, oh, that ain't true. Nobody descended from the sky on a golden chain and put some sand and threw it down on a, okay. But again, as Joseph Campbell said, and he was a white man, he says myth is much more important and true than history. Why? Because myth captures the imagination of people. Myth captures the true essence and meaning of people. If I sit down and tell you history of African people in America from 1619 to 2020, it will bore us all to tears and half of it will be wrong. But if we encapsulate that in stories about certain legendary people and legendary figures and legendary events, the myth, not only will you remember it and be able to manipulate it in the under your current conditions, it's actually more reliable and it's actually more true. Why? Because it leads to action. African people have never really tried to tell stories or myths or tales the way they actually happen. This is why you'll find some people, you ever heard a tale, a Nancy tale, or one of the tales of the Orisha, and somebody tells them, you know, I thought it was this person, or I thought it was that Orisha, or I thought it happened. But the fundamental what? The fundamental moral of the story is what matters. That's the truth in it. It's not whether, oh, Yah cut off our ear, or Ba cut off the ear, or Shun cut off the ear and put it in the soup. Doesn't matter which one. Is the fact that they were deceived by someone that they thought was a friend. It's the moral of the story that's important. That's the moral of the story. And that is the truth in it. And that's what makes it reliable, because the moral doesn't change. So whether you're Brer Rabbit, Nancy the Spider, or any of the other African tales and legends and myths that we've learned about, is more important than actual history or journalism. The fourth quote is, no victory was ever begun or sustained without a belief system. Okay, without a belief system, without spirituality that was greater than the individual. In other words, what spirituality does, and this is another point, another tenet, the spirituality places the individual in a collective context with meaning. So I'll read that again. No victory was ever begun or sustained without a belief system that was greater than the individual. Spirituality places us in the cosmos. We go back to our first definition. It's about the relationship. We said spirituality was about the relationship of man as a spirit to all the other spiritual beings that exist in the mind of the creator. Okay? So we can't even begin to pursue victory without understanding that we are part of something larger or greater than ourselves. Okay? And the last one I'll quote is from Napoleon Bonaparte. And I know you're like, why do you have him in there? But it's not about the person, it's about the quote. He said, in war, the moral is to the physical as 10 is to 1. It's 10 times more important to feel morally correct, to feel like you're in line and in concert, in lockstep, doing the will of the creator, than it is to be physically ready for war. You can train and all that stuff is great, but the will, in other words, let's look at the Vietnamese people, which I know Baba Tashango has made a study of them. The Vietnamese had no airplanes. Let's be clear about that. They had no air force. The Europeans had bombs, they had helicopters, guns, and bullets for days. But the Vietnamese people had what? They had the moral. They had the moral. They said they were willing to die, what, 100, 1,000? For every soldier that you take out, we're willing to lose 100 Vietnamese.
They had heart.
They had heart. That's the moral. The moral is to the physical as 10 is to 1. Our belief in our creator, our belief in the righteousness of our cause, and in the righteousness of our ability to assert our self-will and our self-determination. The true belief in that is worth 10 well-prepared enemy soldiers. So we don't need a lot. Let's look at the Maroons of Haiti. They say what's the percentage? About what? One in every 10 Haitians was a Maroon, if that much. It wasn't the majority of Haitians that led that revolution. It wasn't. It was a minority of people that led it. But what? They were 10 times stronger than what they were, but they really believed and they really, really held true to this idea of sovereignty and liberation. So again, in war, and we are in a war, remember, never forget, the moral, the spiritual is to the physical as 10 is to 1. So in conclusion, I like this kind of sum it up by saying spirituality and the efforts for liberation offer and oppress people the following things. Optimism, the ability that they can be victorious. We look at Bookman's prayer as an example. Hopefulness, he offers you the moral high ground. You know, again, Bookman's prayer cites that, the moral high ground. Spirituality offers you meaning beyond the physical action, meaning beyond the physical condition that's going on. It offers us meaning, okay? And I would say in today's world where we've been programmed to be consumerists and to be so in love with technology and things, that today, I would say our battle today as African people in the world, as much as it is for liberation, it's also for meaning. It's also for meaning. What does it mean to be an African or a new African in 2020? What does it mean? Who are we? Spirituality offers and oppress people perspective, historical perspective. We can look at the way our ancestors looked at things and then see the way we're looking at things now, and we can gain some perspective. Are we looking at the same kind of phenomena today the way our ancestors looked at it? you know, or we want some other stuff, or we want some different stuff, you know what I mean? And so it gives us perspective. Not saying that everything our ancestors did was right or correct, but not saying everything that we're doing is right or correct. It gives us perspective. It gives us ability to juxtapose ideas, themes, and conditions and look at them in a new way, and to gain, again, perspective, to gain some kind of footing in our current reality. Spirituality offers and oppressed people confidence. That's something that's sorely missing in our people today. We need to be confident. Again, we're back to that 10 to 1. We're back to that idea of being on a moral high ground. These things also lead to confidence. Spirituality also offers resiliency, the ability to be knocked down and to be able to get back up, to be able to suffer setbacks and continue to move forward, the ability to be able to endure a defeat in a battle, but yet get ready to prosecute the next offensive or the next military action, if you will, whatever that is. So spirituality is indispensable in warfare. The role of spirituality in warfare and in liberation is indispensable. Spirituality is the nexus point for that which is aspired to and hoped for and its actualization. In other words, spirituality is the middle point between that which we are praying for and that which we see in our minds and that which we're actually working for. That's what I said earlier. Spirituality is that transition zone where we take that which is infinitesimal, that which is intangible, and we bring it into tangibility. That is what spirituality is, and that is what your spirituality is supposed to do. And it's supposed to help you take that which is in your mind and bring it into reality, whether it's a business, whether it's a family, whether it's a free and independent nation state. It exists in an intangible state. You want to bring it into reality. Spirituality is the joining of the two, okay? Spirituality is a process that makes the intangible tangible. Finally, I want to close with this quote. It's called Spiritualizing Warfare. The idea for spiritualizing warfare, I first heard of that, or the concept of it, years ago when the book, The 33 Strategies of War, came out by Robert Greene. And in the preface, he talks about this idea of in executing the 33 strategies of war, he talks about this concept of spiritualizing warfare. So this is my take on what he talked about in that book. But I highly recommend everyone to get that, the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. He says, and these are my notes, spiritualizing warfare means that we must declare unceasing war on ourselves, on our weaknesses, our emotions, our lack of resolution in seeing things through to the end. It means to welcome combat and conflict as a way to prove yourself to yourself and ultimately to continue to grow and develop, gain courage, confidence, and experience. To spiritualize warfare means facing doubts and fears and to do battle with them, not repressing those things. You don't want to repress them, you want to do battle with them. To spiritualize warfare means to want more and greater challenges and to invite more conflict. Spiritualizing war is forging the warrior spirit, and constant practice is the way. In other words, our way has to be the way of the warrior. And that means we are constantly looking for and facing down our doubts, our fears, our worries, our enemies, our internal enemies and our external enemies. It's a constant process, and there's always a new enemy. So this is a process that's ongoing. Spiritualizing your warfare is ultimately the perfection of your spirit. And we began that with the first slide, that we are spiritual beings, we are spirit. And we are in relationship with the Creator, and we're in relationship with all of the creations of the Creator. Spiritualizing your warfare is something that we do on the earthly realm, and the way we do it is by confronting those things that we are in conflict with. So to sum it all up, as a people, spiritualizing warfare is to be in conflict with our oppressors. It is to confront and to challenge them, to do battle with them, to not repress those feelings of fear and confusion that we have relative to the European and others who seek to dominate us. We have to engage them, because in that we transform. In that we become greater than what we are today. in that we matriculate and we grow and develop into who we're supposed to be. If you want to have growth and development, you have to have a righteous opponent. We can't grow without resistance. If you want your muscles to grow, what do you have to do? You have to give them resistance. You want your lungs to be strong, what do you have to do? You have to give them resistance. You have to push them to the max. And eventually you push it a little bit more, you push a little bit more, you push a little bit more, you push a little bit more, your muscles get bigger and stronger, your lungs become bigger, stronger, and your VO2 max is more, becomes greater and greater every day with constant challenge, okay? Same thing with us. Our avoidance, and this is the last thing I'll say and I'll open it up for conversation, our avoidance and our fear, our lack of confidence in engaging our oppressors is actually taking us further away from being spiritual, taking us further away. Why? Because spirituality is all about growth and development. Spirituality is all about growth and development. You can't grow and develop in the absence of resistance. And we have the ultimate opponent at the ultimate time. So with that, I want to end this conversation, or at least my presentation of it, I'm sorry. And I want to move to chat, conversation, questions, or anything anybody wants to say. Thank you very much. Asante Sana.
Let's make some noise. Unmute. Give Baba some love. Give Baba some love. Unmute. Make some noise. Afrikan for Baba.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Very good.
Madasi.
I'm very much interested in what you talked about, the bullets, being immune to bullets in this warfare that we're going to have to conduct over here in this America occupation.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to know what is the spiritual incantations that we should do and use.
What do you mean? I mean, explain that a little bit better. You're saying spiritual incantations we should do and use for
us conducting ourselves in this warfare that we're going to have to conduct, meaning being immune to bullets, bombs, etc. You was talking about that earlier. I'm very interested in that, how to walk through walls.
That stuff there is very much a part of our tradition, very much a part of our history, and there are people that still can do things like that. That requires a level of initiation and a level of apprenticeship, if you will, that is only given to certain people.
Okay.
Those kind of, in other words, that's a power that people have to handle very, very responsibly. And the people who do have those powers have to, they're responsible for making sure that the people they give it to are of a certain kind of character. And I alluded to that earlier when we talked about Nat Turner, that the person's character has to be a certain way. And a lot of times also, to being perfectly honest, it can only be given to people in the bloodline or in the tribal line, if you will. It may not be being shared with people like ourselves. And by ourselves, I mean those of us in the diaspora, because you cannot be accounted for. Our family lines and lineages are not known, if you will, among some of those people. That said, I'll say this. I believe that it's perfectly within our ability, Baba, for us to cultivate these powers amongst ourselves and to go to levels of initiation, go to levels of trance and possession, where we can figure out the necessary items, the necessary herbs, the necessary rituals, practices, and begin to create these kind of phenomena for ourselves. Because one thing I've learned in my practice is that a good Babalawo, a good priest, should become a master of the herbs in his or her environment. A good Babalawo, a good priest should become a master of all of the trees and the barks and the roots and the things in their area. Because ultimately what we do when we do things like that, when we develop the ability to resist bullets or turn bullets, is that we're basically taking matter and we are what they call that when you take matter and you take something that's made of something alchemy. It's basically spiritual alchemy. It's basically spiritual alchemy, and that requires knowing what things are out there and using those things, bringing those items together, be it parts of certain animals, be it barks, be it roots, be it plants themselves, and creating an energy, if you will, that allows us to take certain other elements and to alchemize them and to change them into other things. So in other words, what I'm saying is we have the ability to be able to do that. But it's going to take, again, a certain level of study, a certain level of purity, of character for us to be able to do that. And but again, I don't put anything past us as Africans here, because again, we're the Africans here that created the space in America that now everybody in the world wants to run to enjoy freedom. And we did all that without Babalaos. We did all that without priests and priestesses. We did that just with the sheer will of our and fortitude of our personality. So,
question else I would have to say to you. The first time reason why I was saying that was that Peter Tosh said he met a brother, I think it was in Zambia or Zimbabwe, I think it was Zimbabwe or Tanzania, that he knew a brother that could turn himself into a leopard. So learning that, before I even learned that, I had the ability to come out of this suit that as you looking at me now. And I was able to go all over this etheric universe. So after that, it was nothing in religion you could tell me. Because I understood the bigger picture.
Yes. Those leper societies still exist. They still exist. They call one of the names from is Ekpe Society. A lot of them exist in the Calabar region of Nigeria into Cameroon, and in that area primarily. I'm not saying that's the only place, but that's one of the areas I know that they exist up until the present day. Those leper society they're serious business. I do believe I can't remember. There was a woman that came to my house last year. She also is part of a leper society. I forget. She's from the Congo. She's from the Congo, and one of the ceremonies they go through, something similar to that happens. They actually change.
Would that be Polyomambi?
Say again, Baba.
Polyomambi.
What's that?
Another type of a voodoo.
Palo
Mayombe. Palo Mayombe.
Yes.
Palo Mayombe comes out of Cuba, but indirectly it comes out of the Congo as well.
Right.
Yes. So yeah, these things still exist, and there are people who practice them. And again, a lot of people can do a lot of things, but they may not be quite so quick to want to share with certain people. Also, think about it also this way too, is that you got to be careful you give things too, because everybody, every brother ain't a brother.
And also, I mean, a lot of these stuff is mouth to ear. I mean, it's not, when you deal with the spiritual realm, you have to be ready, but you also have to be worthy of it. So, and, so once you're ready and you are worthy of it, as I say, when you're ready, the master will appear.
Yes.
So, our intention might be good, but we might not be ready.
Yes.
So I think that you have to have a combination of those things. You have to be ready.
Yes.
And you have to be worthy of it.
Yes. And another part is also, you also have to be, and again, in the bloodline. A lot of these are totems.
And
totems. So a lot of us, because of slavery, we don't know our totem. People who are initiated into these leopard societies are from leopard families. You know what I'm saying? You have different totems. So even though you may desire to have a certain ability or power, that may not be a part of who you are, or who your ancestors were. It's not the totem, it's not the family spirit.
Right.
It's not the spirit that incarnates your family.
But that's it's great for everybody to understand.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
Baba, when I wasn't talking over the election, I sincerely apologize about that. One of the things that came to mind to me was Baba Jacob Carruthers' book, The Irritated Genie. How when the Haitians invoked the spirit of the irritated genie, they were able to do work. They were able to get rid of the British and the Spanish. But when they basically toyed with the Phantom of Liberty, they didn't bring forth that spirituality. So they stuck on stupid, for the lack of a better term. So that was the thing that kind of resonated for me throughout your lecture.
Yes. Yes. And we have to be careful when we invoke spirit, when we invoke certain deities, if you will, certain energies. We have to understand, one, what we're dealing with, two, what the nature of that relationship is, spiritually speaking. Some of these energies have to be placated constantly. Some of these energies can be returned to dormancy, if you will, or to a lesser vibration. And some of them have to be continuously negotiated with, or should be continuously negotiated with, unless they become uncontrollable or hostile toward those who awoken them. So that's what you're kind of alluding to, and I think it's very, very important for us to understand that. When you're dealing with shrines, again, we're dealing with energies. We're dealing with spiritual energies. Again, we're dealing with spirits, and of which we're one. Human beings. We're spirit, but there are many other spirits, and these spirits are very, very powerful, and they need to be dealt with in certain ways, and certain kinds of rituals and certain kinds of fashions. And if we forget about that or we neglect those things, they can become, burdens that, like you said, put us stuck on stupid, interminably, So that's a lot of what Haiti is dealing with. That's a lot of what's happening in Haiti.
Can I say, well, I'm going to say what you just said, because I could have been a part of what happened over here in this Mexican American, with this occupation over here.
In what way, Baba?
Bringing in entities that shouldn't be here. What you just talking
Are you
about?
saying that we brought them in or we need to bring them in? I'm not fully understanding.
That did we bring the wrong entities in?
I'm not aware of us bringing any entities in. What I believe happened to us a lot of times is that the entities that we may have had were denied us, and we lost. In general, we lost the ability to be able to contact and interface with these entities. Now, granted, we have traditions. Don't get me wrong. We have juju here. We have hoodoo. We have a lot of those traditions that have stayed. But what we lost with that was a lot of the meaning behind it. The rituals remained. People knew how to put roots on people. People knew how to cure certain things, but we didn't have the moral, ethical component to it in a larger cosmological point of view. That was lost to us. But I think that we need to be doing what they did down in Haiti because we have greater knowledge now. I think we need to be invoking some spirits now. We need to be having some shrine work that does awaken the irritated genie in us, so that we can direct it at our own liberation efforts. And we need to also take into account what happened in Haiti so that we don't lose control.
Where any information that you can give to me and others, I want to know it.
But I think also when we do ritual nowadays, we still have the European vision of what our creator looks like. So, and the universe's frequency. So if we connect things visually to our enemy, even though we're saying these different of our own languages, but that visually we're vibrating still in the European version, I think that's the disconnect. That's why that's on the disconnect. You know what I'm saying?
It is problematic, yes. It can be problematic. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're right. You're quite welcome. Even those of us who have an African spirituality or African tradition, we still have to be careful of the Eurocentric idea or mindset of the creator. And not that we don't have a picture in our mind of God that looks like us. It's more about the power that lies in language. And most of us don't have language. We speak another man's language. And therein, that limits to some degree the things that we can think, the things that we can invoke, because we're limited by the language. There may not be words, I won't say may not, there are not words in English language for things that we need to invoke. We have to learn another language to even have the proper word to invoke the thing that we want to invoke. And this is part of our study. This is part of what we are trying to do.
And also, a lot of the English words we think means one thing actually means something else.
Absolutely.
Because they change the etymology of the word. So we think they say something agreeable to us, but it's actually detrimental.
Absolutely. And that's why I began this lecture with definitions, because definitions are the most important thing. They set the context for everything to follow.
Even, and I always going back to the great landmass, to where the great earthquake, when things broke off, and we were here, and there.
Right.
knowing that there's a lot of pyramids here in the Americas, miles on the magnetic grid, more than on the other side. So going to what you're talking about, the spirituality and invoking all our entities, our rishas and everything, we have that here and over there. So we somehow have to invoke, connect, and get this going again.
I agree. And I think we are. I think there are people who are doing that. I know there are people doing that. There's a lot of us have relationships with people in Africa, whether it's Nigeria or Ghana, the Gambia, Congo, Namibia, Zimbabwe, South Africa. I know people who have relationships. I'm not talking about just personal relationships. I'm talking about spiritual relationships that are studying and learning and utilizing information. But what I think we're lacking, though, is a comprehensive overall Pan-African approach to our oppression. That we're doing it individually, and we're doing it in these little isolated pockets. And unlike the spider, which they say, is the spider, spiders work together, they can tie down a lion. We're still operating as individual spiders. That's our challenge, I believe, that the knowledge is there and the will is there, but the strategy on how to come together and combine our efforts so that we...
And that's what's frustrating.
Yes.
That's what's frustrating to me.
Absolutely.
That's very frustrating to me because if you know my history, my story, I said that wrong, is that I didn't understand a lot of stuff until I was after 20 years of age. And knowing where I'm from, I wasn't from Rosewood. And nobody talked about Rosewood. Even my grandfather, I always wondered why he hated Caucasians. He hated crackers. And I understood that years later. And he didn't play around. He used to keep a 45 in his car right on the dashboard. He ain't play. And it's in Brunson, Alachua, in Florida. So that's why when I'm asking questions or saying things from the heart, from my mind, that's why I say it, because we got to really understand ourselves and our people.
It's lifelong work, Baba. It's lifelong work. So much is taken from us, and we're putting it back together. We're not a basket case.
No, we're not.
We've made a lot of progress, in the last, when I would say 100 years. You know what I mean? This conversation, we're talking about this 100 years in the whirlwind. 100 years ago, 1920, we weren't saying Ashe. 100 years ago, we weren't talking about Orishas and Necharu and Nananom. There might have been some people here and there talking about it, but it's not like it is now. I mean, I never mentioned there's a language that you and I can speak today that 100 years wasn't present. We didn't have Babalawos and Akomfo and Akomfo, people like that we do today. So we've made incredible progress toward recapturing those things which were stolen and lost to us through the transatlantic slave trade and all that subsequently happened.
And the slave trade that was done in a Mexium, which we call America today, from people here going to the Caribbean, the Caribbean Ocean, where Suriname, Guyana, all up in there. It's a whole vast thing to learn.
Yes, I agree.
Baba, I just want to say thank you for offering the definition of spirituality, because I've always heard it as this great connection or greater connection to yourself, but you added on to it's really about embracing our challenges. And when for me, it really helps me to say, you know what, stop whining and being upset about what's happening, because as we grow spiritually, we're going to have to fight the challenges that, that will help us grow spiritually. So I really appreciate that comment.
Yes,
that
ma'am.
you
Thank
made.
you.
And also too, that when you talked about how our ancestors, when they were enslaved, how they were still able to make progress when they did not have, when they didn't know who their totem was, or they did not make offerings. So I just thought that, you know, I appreciate that piece that you offered.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, thank you. And again, you know, it's back to what Bookman Duddy, you know, said. You know, we never lost contact with our Creator. We never lost contact. We never lost the ear, and we never were out of the sight of the Creator. The relationship was there. What happened was it was an interloper. There was a group of people that placed themselves in between us and the Creator, so that we thought we only saw them. You know, they blocked our vision. They never blocked the Creator's vision. You know what I mean? So part of resistance of white supremacy is moving that interloper, removing that obstacle out of the way, and reestablishing that direct contact between us and them. That's all the European does. He places himself in between you and, you know, that's Dr. Clark said. He colonized the knowledge of God, and then replaced himself as God. So a lot of people are looking to him, you know, the European, as this image of God, and that's the mistake. But Olodumare has never forsaken us, never lost contact with us, and in spirit, we never lost contact with Olodumare. We never lost contact with spirit or the ear of the Creator, and that's why when we pray earnestly, that's why when we do the will of Olodumare, when we're righteous, which means to be in right relationship with the natural order, to be in right relationship with the will of the Creator, we get answers. Go ahead, Baba. You're muted. Go ahead, Baba.
Even in Haiti, I've known that Haiti used to send out a lot of wild and brown rice. They used to export a lot of their stuff. It was time when people used to love to go to Haiti, you know, to have, you know, vacations and stuff and do all type of stuff. Now, would I look at that as part of the Yoruba influence? Or was it also our people that started being collaborators with the Uhuru? That where you got it today, they're in squalor.
Right. Right.
I'd like to know your perspective on that.
Man, we'll be here for hours.
Okay.
We'll be here for hours. But you know, but again, our Haitian brothers and sisters, man, they I believe I find it very, very difficult to be overly critical of Haiti, despite all of the problems and challenges they have, because they were the inspiration for Nat Turner. They were the inspiration for Prosser. They were the inspiration for Jean-Marc Vesey. They were the inspiration for so many of you know, they were the inspiration even for the African liberation movements to come in the 1900s. Haitians did something that no other people on the face of the earth. Again, this is why I know that we have a direct line. We have a line to the divine. They're the only people in the history of the world that were enslaved that ultimately rose up to conquer their enslavers and take control of the land that they were once enslaved upon. No other people in the history of the world has pulled that off, except for that group of Africans in Haiti. So whatever they're going through, we should always, you know, we always have to curtail some of our criticism for the Haitians, because they, no matter what they do, they can truly say that they use African spirituality to attain African liberation. The only ones that
I'm not criticizing them, but I'm always going to criticize that collaborator.
Oh, absolutely. And it's always going to be a problem. It's a problem today. We have collaborators amongst us, and they have to be dealt with. We have not done a good job of dealing with our turncoats. You know, the word that our Hayward Jeffries, the man that sold out. I do believe he's the one that sold out BC. I do believe his name was Hayward. You know, he's the one that ran to the whites and said what they're about to do. And yeah, so we that's been a very bad matter of fact. You know, when we don't punish the collaborators, we actually encourage more people to do it.
Right.
Baba.
And we got it real disorganized here in America, North America, Mexico, here, with a lot of these sellouts, a lot of them. And then you got to go to where you work at or in your neighborhood, these sellouts.
Yeah.
It's more closer than being across the water, etc.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mama Fia, go ahead.
I was trying to ask a question my son wanted to ask you, and I couldn't get it correctly, so I'm gonna have him say it. Say it, your question, hon. It's my son Jalil.
Earlier today, you said that you spent 155 years trying to integrate with people that that alienated us, and I wanted to know like what your plan was moving forward if it's not integration.
Oh, good question. The plan moving forward is the title of this lecture. Is to pursue African sovereignty. To pursue African sovereignty. You know, ultimately, that's going to be an intergenerational effort. So, you know, day to day, what that means is, again, being a good husband, being a good father, being a good leader, in my family and in my tribe, my community. It means, you know, looking for and working with like-minded people, participating in events like this, and looking to create links and linkages with families, people, organizations that are like-minded, and ultimately it means building institutions that will survive my lifetime. You know, so again, the number one institution being family. You know what I mean, and passing along this mission of African sovereignty to my children in such a way that they can pursue, you know, it and pass it along to their children, and leaving them with the resources that they need so that they don't have to start again at zero. So we want to leave, you know, financial assets. We want to leave educational assets. We want to leave cultural assets. We want to leave spiritual assets. So that would be the shrine. That would be the library. You know, you see all my books here, and some of them you don't see, you know, those things. That's, you know, part of the educational assets, financial assets, properties, and things like that. We want to leave spiritual assets, the shrines and the rituals and the things that we've learned. We want to leave cultural assets, you know, our family mission statement, our family constitution, you know, and the other family things that we've put into place. You know, this is just a few of the things that we have to do, but this is a multi-generational effort because, again, we didn't get in this situation overnight. We won't get out of it overnight. But my part is to do that. My parents' part was to put us back on this track. My parents grew up Negroes. Now my parents grew up Christians. My parents grew up, you know, with no knowledge of self when they were born. And when I came on the scene, they had that part figured out. My part is to begin to, our part, this generation's part is to begin to accrue assets in the crucial areas of life and to organize those assets so that our children have resources. And the most important resource that we must give our children is time. And the way we give them time is by accruing some economic resources and giving them the kind of skills that will allow them to control their time so that they can spend most of their time pursuing sovereignty and liberation and not working for somebody else, and then giving whatever time they have left to their sovereignty and liberation efforts. So that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm teaching, and that's what I'm trying to share with and other families and other like-minded people like your mother and many of the people on this call.
And Baba, just so here, I'm sorry, go ahead. I don't want to take all the time up. Go ahead.
No, and Baba, the other asset was each other. And
absolutely.
And events like this help us link each other together because we know we can't do this alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have to create, and again, I can go on a whole nother about how we have to create tribes. We have to create people who are, people who are linked up together in such a way that their families become tribe. And that goes to a whole nother thing where, you know, where our families need to be not only just linked up in terms of being part of the same community, but where you really create a tribe ultimately is through intermarriage. So these like-minded people have to create institutions that support their families, but then ultimately you have to become one great family. And the way you become one great family is when our children marry each other. That's the key. That's the key. Family ultimately to clan, clan to tribe, tribe to nation. It's intergenerational. It has to happen over time, but we have to put certain things in place so that these things can happen over time. I think we have 3 minutes left. So, yeah, no, you're welcome. You're quite welcome. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for that part of what you just said in this last little couple of seconds. That's what we're gonna have to do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I just want to just shout out a few people while I'm on here right now. My brother Gabriel Swahili. That's my brother down in Brazil. great brother, great family. He's doing the work down there. Hopefully one day our families will be joined together through marriage. Maybe, you know, my son or grandson will marry his granddaughter or daughter, or vice versa. One of his sons will marry one of my daughters or granddaughters. I recognize on here as well. I'm looking for my brothers. My biological brothers on here, Obawa, my sister-in-law, Kanine, who is the daughter of the great Baba Ishangi. So my family has now entered into covenant with the Ishangi family, the Olayinka family and Ishangi family are united, not just in ideology now, but through marriage. So we share blood now, you know, with the birth of my nephew. Just want to recognize, you know, you all and my Egbe members, my fellow Egbe that are on here, Ekundayo, Iya Nyanza, and I don't know if anybody else is on here for me, Egbe, but this is our tribe up here in Philadelphia, Egbe Joba, and we've been getting it on and doing what we've been doing for the last 23 years as far as creating tribe, creating community, and so yeah, you know, we're not no newbies at this. We're continuing to work. But I want to thank you all. We got about a minute left, a little less than a minute. I want to thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you all for attending 100 Years in the Whirlwind. Stay through to the end, Baba Baruti, and to the closing remarks. And let's continue to link up and support one another. Ashe.
Again, unmute. Let's give Baba some love. Unmute. Make some noise.
Ominira Adulawo. Abibi Fahodie. Oh yeah, support United Front. Please get the new project from United Front. Please, Harriet Shotgun. It's awesome. Support them. They do music that our children can listen to, and it will continue to strengthen us for this fight. Thank you.
We got the official 100 Years RBG tees too. UFSAFO.com. Let's get it.
All right. I love it. I love it.
Bomani.
Yeah, I like that.
Abibi Fahodie. Ominira Adulawo. Peace and Black Power. Love y'all.
Love you too, Baba.
What's that was? It sounded a little like Tolu to me, but I don't think she's on here. Okay. So he said to
Okay.
if I could.
Baba, if you end all, then it'll shut down because I
All
don't know
right.
who's recording.
Not a problem. I got it. You want to end it now?
Yes, sir.
Done deal.
Doc Shotgun. Buck front. Yeah. Shot. Intro to O. Yeah. And my dude that Timbuktu the Ave. For new, renew your passion. Shun the condition. And not the who, what, when, where, and you are from. At last. Put the higher